Remix is a full stack framework built on top of React that offers a unique approach to building applications. Now, I'm going to walk you through the key features and benefits that we get by using Remix. And we're going to cover topics such as routing. We are also going to take a look at outlet navigation, how we can go on to handle shared layout between different pages in our Remix application. And most importantly, every application we need to fetch data. So I'm going to show us how to make use of this Loader API, which is an easy and seamless way that we can go on to fetch data within our Remix applications. And then we're going to see how we can submit form, making use of Action API, and how we can go into handle server-side actions within our Remix application. And then we're going to take a look at how we can connect different styling libraries or make use of CSS in our Remix application. We're going to take a look at the link component, and we sometimes want to have SEO benefits within our application. And I'm going to show us how we can customize the meta component that comes with Remix. Alright, so let's not waste any more time and let's take a look at Remix and what an awesome framework Remix is. Let's come over to the Remix documentation. And over here in remix.com, we want to get started. We want to be able to create a new Remix project. And for that, you can come over to this docs section, and here you're going to see the command you're going to run to be able to create a new project. So npx create remix at latest. Let's go on and copy this. And next, you should have your terminal opened, and I'm going to cd into a folder on my device where I would like to create this new application. So in that case, I'm going to cd into my documents, project, Udemy, and in here I'm going to be creating this new application. So I'm going to paste in this command, and followed by this, we can provide the name of the application we want to build. So in this case, I'm going to give it a name of Remix Guide. You can obviously give this any name of your choice and do go on to execute this project. Now you see that we have this using Remix Guide as our project directory, and it prompts us if we would like to use Git in our project. In this case, I'm going to say no, I'm not going to be initializing Git, at least for now. And then I'm going to say yes, so that Remix goes on to install our dependencies with npm, which is a process that can take some time. So once it is done, we are going to come back and continue taking a look at the created project that we get from Remix. And we have our dependencies installed, and what we want to do next is to enter the project directory, the project we just created. So I'm going to cd into the Remix Guide, which was the name I gave my application. If you gave it a different name, you're going to cd into that application. And then I'm going to open it with code dot to open it up inside Visual Studio Code. Now we're going to take a break. We're going to come back and take a look at the different files and folders that we get from Remix. So taking a look at the different files and folders that we get from Remix, hopefully most of these files at least should look very much familiar to us. And if we come over to the vitconfig.ts, this file defines the configuration options for Vite, and Vite is a build tool that Remix uses for development and also for production builds. Now the tsconfig.json contains our configuration files for TypeScript. And there we have this eslint.rc.cjs. Now this is a file that configures the eslint linter, okay, and this is just a tool that helps to enforce some code styles and maybe identify potential errors while building out our application. And then we have this public folder, and this public folder is where we can go on to serve static assets in our application. So this can include images, fonts, CSS files, and also favicon. All right, and then we can directly access the files that we store in this public folder using relative path. And then we have the app folder. Now this app folder is our core application code. This is the heart of our Remix application, and most of the code we are going to be writing is going to be contained inside of this app folder. And here we have this entry client.tsx, and we also have this entry server.tsx, and we have this root.tsx. This entry client.tsx is a file that contains the initial JavaScript code, and this code is what executes on the user's browser whenever the page loads. Okay, and typically it just helps to render the React component that make up our UI. And what you can see over here is Remix will handle hydrating your app on the client for you, and you're free. So you're free to delete this file if you like, and if you ever want it back, you just need to run this npx remix review, and then you would have it back. And same for the entry server.tsx. This entry server.tsx file handles the initial rendering of the server. So it goes on to fetch data, create initial HTML structure, hydrate the React components, and then the client can take over from here. Again, you're free to delete this file, and if you ever want it, do go on and run npm remix review, and then you can go over to this link to know more for more information. So that's it. We're not going to be working into these two files, so you can delete as you wish. And then we have this root.tsx. Now this root.tsx is our root component, and this file is going to define the root component of our entire application. And in here we can go on to define layouts, so layout that we want to be applied application wide, such as header, maybe footer, things that we use across all pages. And here you see we have this header tag with some meta tags that are being set up here. And we also have these two components which look strange, and then we also have these two other components which are very much strange, and these are the scroll restoration and also this scripts component. Now this scroll restoration that we see over here, now this just goes on to emulate the browser built-in scroll restoration behavior. Okay, and the main function, it just goes on to make sure that when the user scrolls, the scroll position is restored to the point where the user left off on the previous page. Okay, and especially after data has been loaded. And here we also have these scripts. Now this script is just going on to inject the client-side JavaScript code in our application, and it can be things like event handling, so things like button clicks, form submission, DOM manipulation. That is the duty of this script. Now you see over here that this script is actually placed above this scroll restoration. And with that, Remix ensures that the scroll restoration happens just after the client-side code has been loaded and executed. So that's why we have this scroll restoration just before the script. Now we're going to come back to this root.tsx obviously, and then we have routes. And now we have the underscore index.tsx, which is our home page. This is our root. Not the root route. Yeah, this is our root route. So this function that we're exporting here, index, is our home page. And to see the content of this page, we can open up your terminal, and this terminal, you're automatically navigated to this working directory. And now you can run npm run dev. Now Vite is going to go on and build a project and give us a local preview on localhost 5173. And here we can visit the browser and paste this in. And now we're going to see welcome to Remix and all these links, which is what we are saying here. So that means we can change this content already and have a h1 here, which we can call home page like this. And if we save, we see the home page over here. Now let's come back to the root.tsx, and over here we have this outlet that is being returned inside of this app here. Now what is the work of this outlet? This outlet is a special component you see here that we get from Remix Run React, And with this, it represents a placeholder where child routes within our application is going to be rendered. So child routes within our application is going to be rendered here where we have this outlet. Remember, we have this layout, and here we have these children, and automatically this is more like a placeholder for other child routes we are going to have, because this layout is a function we are exporting in our application. This layout is going to be present for our entire application, and when we switch through different routes, they are going to be taken over in this place of outlet. Now, this is how it works. When a user visits a URL in our Remix application, Remix is going to be starting the app component. So this component that we have defined over here. Then Remix goes on to search for a matching route in our app. Now it goes on to search with our app, and here in our routes here, based on the URL. Now, if a match is found, Remix then goes on to render the corresponding route component. And in this case, we have this underscore.tsx, and now this is going to be as a child of the outlet. So of this outlet that is within the child, this app component here. Okay, so this is how it works. And in case there's no matching route found, now Remix might then go on to display a 404 page. All right, and with this outlet, we can have nested routes, define nested routes within our application. So up next, let's go on and understand what this meta is actually doing here, because we just have this component here and it doesn't seem like we are using it anywhere. To see how the meta component works, if we come over to our underscore index.tsx, you see here we have defined this meta that we have here, and this is an API that is being exposed for us by Remix. Now this const meta is a keyword, is a unique name, and Remix, whenever it sees this, it knows that we want to define some meta description inside of our Remix application. Now if this is our home page, and here in the root.tsx, this is for layout, and remember we said that this is going to wrap what we use application wide within our application, within our Remix project. If we come here and we comment out this meta for a second, and we come back to our project and open up our terminal and come over to the elements tab, if we check the header, you see that we see these tags, these meta tags here, because we have them here for our layout, but we don't see this title and this name. Now if we come and we bring this back in and check, you see automatically we have the title and we also have this meta name and this content. Now we can come here and we can definitely add more as we wish. We can add another object, because this is an array of objects, and we can give this name, let's say a name of keywords, and let's say we have some keywords like Remix and React in our application. They are going to be defined here. So anything SEO related, canonical URLs, we are going to be defining inside this meta function. So once we save this and we come back, you see we have these keywords and this content here that has been defined for our application. And the same works for the link component. So this link we are seeing here, we're going to see how it works in a second. And to see more of it, now is the time to go and install an external styling library. So we're going to go on and install Tailwind CSS. To have Tailwind CSS in our project, you can come over to the tailwindcss.com documentation, and here in the docs guide, you can come over to the frameworks guide for Remix. And the next thing we need to do is to install the Tailwind CSS, Post CSS, and Auto Prefixer packages as development dependencies. So let's copy the command, and I'm going to stop the project for a second and paste this in. Now, while these are installing, the next thing we'd like to do is to run the Tailwind CSS init command. So Let's copy this, come back to our application, and I'm going to paste this in here. Now, this is going to give us two files, the post CSS file, so this post css.config.js, and also this tailwind config.ts file. And here we need to modify this content so that tailwind CSS is going to know where of the path to all our template files is located. And for that, I'm going to copy this content and update this that we have over here. And now tailwind CSS will know where our files are living. And lastly, we need to go on and add, not lastly, we need to go on and add the tailwind CSS directives to our CSS. So I'm going to copy this, and in our app, I'm going to be creating a new file. So inside this app, and this is going to be tailwind.css. And then I'm going to paste in these tailwind directives right in here. And now, lastly, we need to find a way to import this tailwind CSS file inside of our root.tsx. Now, if we come here, you see that we need to import this CSS file. And for that, we can copy this import, this style sheet import, and I'm going to paste it in here. And this is looking over here in the tailwind.css. And next thing we need to do, we are going to copy these links that we're exporting here, and we can paste it in here. So let's go on and import this links function from remix run node like this. And if we save our application and quickly just copy this to update what we have on our home page and come back to our remix application, come back to your index_index.tsx, and I'll paste this in here and restart our application npm run dev. Now, once our application starts and we come back to the browser and give this a reload, we see automatically that our styling works. Now, we can come back to the root.tsx, and all we did was to export this const links. And just as we had meta, you see that this is a function that is returning an array of objects. And here we are having this star sheet. Automatically, this links is going to be injected inside this links component that we have here. So these are special names, this link, and also this meta like this. These are special names, and if we comment out this link component and we come out to application, give this a reload, you see that we lose our tailwind CSS. So this is where you're going to be pointing to external link URL, maybe CDNs that you would like to use in your application, and automatically they're going to be injected in here. Now, it's important to note that every page can go on to have their own layout, and you're not forced to, strictly have this layout just defined inside of this root.tsx. So next, if we come back, we see our tailwind configuration is working and everything is working fine. Let's see how we can go on to fetch data in our Remix application. And for that, I'm going to come back to the Remix documentation. And here, I'm going to search for loader like this. So do go on and search for loader. And this is going to bring you to this section. So over here where you have route module. And in here, you have this loader here. And you can also see this meta that we just spoke about. We have all of these, and you also can see these links that we just discussed right here. But let's take a look at this loader. Now you see that every route can define a loader function that provides data to the route. And this is how it works. So you have this loader, you have this async function, and it returns this JSON. So this is how it works, bare rest minimum. Okay, and you see here, it's important to note that this function only ever runs on the server side. So whatever we write inside this function is going to be called on the server. So on the initial server render, it provides data to the HTML document. And what this means is that we can go on to directly talk to our database. We can go on to use server-only API secrets and much more. Okay, so any code that isn't used to render the UI will be removed from the browser's module. Now, it's important to know, if we come over here, that whatever we return from the loader is going to be exposed to the client. So even if the component doesn't render, so whatever we return here is going to be exposed to the client. So it's important that we go on to treat the loader the same care as our public API endpoint. All right, so the function itself is going to be called on the server, but whatever I return is going to be exposed to the browser. Now let's see how this works. We can come here and let's come over to our page, to our home page, and let's say we want to go on and fetch some data. So we can come here and we can export this const loader, and this loader is going to be equal to this function. So we're going to fetch data, so we can mark this as async. Now we're going to be getting some response, which is going to be coming in from await fetch API, and fetch is going to need the URL. So for this, we are going to be making use of the JSON API. So let's come over to this JSON placeholder, which is a free, fake, and reliable API for testing and also prototyping. Now you see here that we have some resources, 6 common resources, but in this case, let's try to make use of this post. And you see, if we click here, it gives us 100 posts. I'm just going to click here, and this is the response. But we want to limit this to, let's say, 5. So I'm going to add this underscore limit and set it equal to 5 like this. And now we see only 5 posts. So I'm going to copy this URL, and we're going to make use of it right here. I'm going to paste it in here. And once we have this, sorry, give me a second. Yeah. So once we have our response, now we're using the fetch API. To get our data, we also need to await our response, and then we can call .json, and we can then go on to return our data. All right, so before we return here, let's just log this to the console.log data, and if we save this over here, we should be seeing this. So we see that we get the post that we just saw not quite long in JSON placeholder, so 5 of them. And you see here, we are seeing it on the server side and not on the user's browser. And to prove that's the case, if we come back to our Remix application here, and I just open up the console, you'll see over here, we don't see anything in the logs. So we don't see anything over here. Now we are fetching this data on the server, and you see how simple. One of the benefits that comes with Remix, we don't have to use our use effect, use our state and stuff like that. It's as simple as calling this loader and doing our data fetching. Now this loader is going to be called first when the page is going to be loaded, okay? And here we want to go on and display the data. So first I'm going to change this h1 to a div. And I'm going to remove these class names that we have over here and just have an empty string. And to get access to the data, if we come back to the documentation, you see here that we can make use of another hook that is being exposed to us by Remix. And that hook is this use loader data hook. Okay, and with this hook, we can go on to have access to the data that is being returned, and we see over here it should be returned inside this utility JSON. Cool, so I'm just going to quickly update that and return JSON, which should be imported from at remix-run node like this. So it should be somewhere here. And I'm going to return it as an object where we're going to have the key as data and the value as data, or we can just have block here, and this blocks like this, and the value is going to be this data over here. So to get access to it, we can come here and say const, then we're going to be destructuring this, which is going to be coming in from use loader data like this. Now you see that this use loader data is of type unknown, and if we try to destructure blocks here, it works, but you see we have this error, and one of the error we have is because property blocks does not exist on type of unknown. So for TypeScript to be happy, this use loader is a generic type, and you see by default it is unknown. And we can say this is going to be type of, and then the type of this loader function. And now we have blocks. You see we can destructure blocks from here. Now to get better TypeScript completion, we can still come further and say this data we're going to get is going to be an array of objects, where each object is going to have an ID, which is of type string. It's going to have a title, which is of type string. It's going to have a body, which is of type string. And lastly, it's going to have a user ID, which is also of type string. So here, if we hover on blocks, you see now it is of type these blocks with this JSON, the file object like this. Cool. So we can come over here in our application, and I'm going to have this and say blocks.map, which is going to give us each blog. And in this case, I'm going to return on that div, where we're going to display the blog.body here. Now for React to be happy, we need to pass a key. And for the key, we can use the blog.id as a key. Now, if we save this and come over to our application, you will see over here that we successfully render the application. I'm going to give this a reload, and you see that we successfully render our list of blogs. Now, I'm going to quickly format this, give this a display of grid, give it a grid calls 4, give it a gap of 5, and for this other div, I'm going to give it some class names, give it a p of 3, and give it some shadow md, and give this rounded sm. And if we save this and come back here, we should see our different blogs rendered like this. And since we have our layout, I'm going to come over to our layout, and here in our root.tsx, I'm going to wrap everything here inside main. And once we do, and we come back to our application, we don't see any change. But if we inspect our elements, you would see over here that everything is now wrapped inside of this main. And that's what I mean by saying this layout is going to affect our entire application. Now, the reason why I gave it this main is because I also want to have a padding around our entire application. I'm just going to give this a padding of 5 over here, just to shift it a little bit from here. And this is super cool. So we have seen how data fetching works in Remix. Now this is just the basics of this loader. We're going to see how it works, because this loader obviously gets access to the request, get access to the context, and we can also come here, even the params, and we can come here to return something. And it's important to know that if we don't return, I'm just going to comment this out, we are going to have an error, because I'm just going to quickly comment this. And was it here? I'm going to quickly save this, and you see we're going to have an error now, because we are making use of loader and we are not returning anything from loader function, and it tells us to please return a value, or we should return null. So whenever you're making use of this loader, please do make sure that you're returning a value, and everything is going to work fine. Now we're going to take a look at routing. We're going to see how routing works in Remix, and then we're going to configure our application to handle different routes. So how does routing work in Remix? Now, when I click on one of these blogs, I want to go to the blogs and the ID page. And for us to do that, I'm going to change this link, this div, to make use of link, which will be coming from Remix run React. So this over here. And here, I'm going to have this tool, and this tool is going to be dynamic. So it's going to be going to have a backtick and say /blogs. And then we're going to say / and then we want to go to the blog.id like this. Now, if we save this and we come back to the application and we click on this, you see we're going to blogs/1. And if we click on the second blog, we should be going into, I'm just going to click on this blogs/2. Cool. Now, how do we make sure that we have that page? So make sure we have that dynamic page. We can come over to our routes, and I'm going to create a new file, which I'll call blogs, and $, and then I'm going to have blog ID like this .tsx. Now to explain, this dot here is going to be like blogs and then / in the URL, and this $, tells Remix that this is a dynamic path. So blog/1, blog/2 is going to be looking right inside here. So I'm going to quickly bootstrap this React component and call this blog, and get rid of this React.js import. Now, if we save this and come back to our application and give this a reload, we should be seeing blog over here. Now, that's because here we have this route that is going to be catching this route that we have defined in here. So this is how it works. And let's come back to our JSON placeholder, and we want to go on to fetch a blog with a specific ID. So to do that, we see here we have this route. So blog/1, in this case post and stuff like that, is going to be targeting that route. So if we come here and post, it's actually post, not blog, but it's fine. Post/1 is going to be returning an object. So now let's go back to our application, and we want to now fetch a specific post. To do this, we are going to come back here to this route, and here we also need to make use of the loader function. So I'm going to export const loader, and this is going to be equal to this async function. And here, remember, we must return something. So for us to avoid any errors, we can initially return null. And how do we go on to fetch? How do we have access to this blog ID that we have here? So to these two, how do we have access to these two inside of our component? So to have access to the params, what we're going to do is to define a type first. Now this loader is going to take in some arguments, and this is going to be of type loader function args. And this is going to be imported from React remix run node like this. And with this, we have access to the context, to the params, and to the current request. So we're going to need the params here. And with the params, let's just log this to the console.log params like this. And if we save this, and you see here, params is actually an object where we have the block ID, and you know that here we have this two, which is a string. So we want to come here and make use of this ID to make our request. To do that, I'm going to say const, and here we're going to have this, which is going to be equal to fetch, and fetch needs the URL. And the URL at this point is going to be dynamic, and this is the URL. I'm just going to copy this, and then I'm going to paste this in here. And rather than have one, we want to have access to these two. So we're going to do something like this. We're going to be saying params, and then we're going to say the blog ID like this. And again, we're going to get our response, and we can come further down here, and const data is going to be equal to await response.json like this. And we can go on to return JSON, which should be imported from remix run node. And then I'm going to pass the post or blog, anyone. Since we are going with blog already, I'm going to call this blog, which is going to be our data, and this should be fine. So I'm going to save this. I'm going to save this, and let's log this blog to the console.log data over here. And here we should see it's pending, and that's because we didn't await fetch here. So here we needed to await fetch, and we can now get rid of this and go again, and now we should see our blog here. Super cool. Now again, this is good practice. We have done this before. We can come over here and say const. We are going to get this from our use loader data. And here we're going to be getting access to our data. In this case, it's going to be our blog. For TypeScript to be happy, we're going to set the type here and say this is going to be type of, and then we pass our loader. And also we can say this is going to be an object. I'm going to copy the type here, an object with these properties. So I'm going to copy this type and also make use of it here. So now we have this blog. We want to render it here. So I'm just going to have this h1, and we're going to display the blog.body, and I'm going to have this paragraph where we display the blog.title. And maybe the title should be h1 on the body. So here I'm going to have the h1 for the title, and the body is going to be this paragraph tag. And quickly I'm going to give this a p of 4, give this a rounded sm, and that should help. So now if we save this and come back to our application, we are not controlling the width. Yeah, the width might still be too long. So I'm just going to give this maximum width of MD 28 rem. Let's see. And max width MD, just did I save? Yep, and reload this. We actually don't see any effect, so I'm just quickly going to give this a width of, let's say, 360 pixels like this. And we save this and reload this. We actually don't see any change, and why is that? I don't want to focus more on the styling, but let me quickly check why our width is not being applied here. So why this just has a padding of 5. All right, and if we come here, we have this div, and this div has a width, and the width is not being applied. All right, so let's come back here, and what I'm gonna do, I'm actually gonna cut this and have it inside another div like this, and let's see if that helps controls it. All right, so for that, I'm quickly going to quit and restart to be sure everything, all our changes has been picked up. And if we reload this, yeah, now we see our width, it wasn't picking up our changes. And I'm gonna give this some border, and yeah, it looks cool. So this is it. And now how does navigation works? So we have seen how it works, and in here, if we want to have a link that takes us to home, we just need to import this link, and there we can say home, and in here we are going to have this not class name, we're going to have this to, which is going to take us back to our home page like this. If we save this and now we click on home, we should be redirected back to our home page, and we have an error. Let's give this a reload, try it out again, come back to the blog page, come back to our home page, and everything is working fine. So you see how it works. Now we have this, we have the basics laid out. Now we're going to see how we can create mutation. We're going to have a form that we would like to submit to update a specific user from JSON placeholder. All right, so let's quickly see how it works. Let's try to update a specific post, and now we can make use of the patch request to post and the ID, and then let's see how it works. So let's see how forms works in Remix. To see how form works in Remix, you see here that we have this form component that is built into Remix, and this form is being enhanced by HTML form. And now this goes on to submit data across actions, so data to actions via fetch. And we have access to different states. So we have the pending states in use navigation hooks. And we're going to see how this works in a second. And the gist of it is here, we're going to import this form from Remix run React. And this form, we're going to give it the action and also the method. Okay, so we can give it an action / events, and we can also provide a method. And now we have different inputs. Now this action prop is the URL to submit the form data to. Okay, that's what the action is. And if it's undefined, it defaults to the closest route in the context. Now this closest route is going to be, in this case, if we have a form here and we don't define an action, if we have a form inside this blog /run, it's going to submit it to this blog /one route. That's what this means. And let's see, we also have the method, and this is going to determine the HT method verb to be used. It is delete, get, patch, and the default is get. So you can overwrite it using method post. All right, so let's see how this works in a second. And this is the documentation in case you would like to know more. And just one, you can see the action URL in this case is going to go to actions, and then you have the index.tsx, and the same over here. All right, so let's see how this works. I'm going to come back to the application, and here, just right here, let's have a form. So I'm just going to define this form, which is going to be imported from remix run react. And inside this form, let's say we want to have an input. Okay, and I'm going to also have a button. And you know this button within a form in plain HTML that is of type submit actually goes on to submit the form. And I'm just going to give this UI text of update like this. And if we save, we should see our form here with our input, and the styling is totally off. And I'm just going to give this quickly a class name of border like this. And we see I'm going to wrap this inside a div so that I can style this div, give it a bit of a padding of 3, and give this a border like this. And if we come back, we see something like this, and also give it a margin y of 5, and yeah. And lastly, I'm going to give this flex space x of let's say space x of 3, and it looks like this. And I'm also going to give this max width of, let's say, 48, too small. And let's say the max width of fit. Do we have it? Yep, let's see. And now it fits the content. And I'm just going to make this flex call so that we have them stacked on top of each other. And items start like this so that the button goes to the left. Cool. Now it's not pretty, but at least it's just going to work in our case to see how this form submission works. Now this form, we're going to provide a method, and we want the method to be patch like this. And how do we go on and submit this form? Okay, how does this form submission work? Now in here, remember that if we come back to the remix, we can go on to define an action. So let me search over here if we see the action. And here we perform plus action. So let's visit this link over here, and this takes us to YouTube. All right, so I'm going to show us how it works. But if we come back to our remix application, we're going to define an action. So we have a loader here, and we have seen what this loader is for, at least the basics. And here we're going to export a const action. Now I feel we can see this action here. Sorry, give me a second. If we come here where we have this, we should see action somewhere here. Let me quickly search for it. And yeah, route mutation action. Cool. So now we see the action, and here you can have a route action, and this action is a server only function to handle data mutations and also actions. Okay, and if a non-get request is made to your route, then the action is called before the loader. Okay, now in this case, you see here, if it's not a non-get request, then this action is going to be called. Now actions have the same API as loader, and the only difference is when they are called. Okay, this enables you to collocate everything about the data in a single route module. So it has the same API as we just saw here, and we see it here and how it works within this form. All right, so let's do this. Let's see how it works. Come back to our application. So action is also going to be equal to this async function. And in here, you know, the only difference is how it is called. So we also need to return something. So in this case, we're going to return null. And let's just console.log code. Let's just log this code to the console, and let's try to submit this form. So I'm going to click on update and come back to the terminal, and you see code 3 times because I clicked on the button 3 times. And if I come and click on it one more time and come back here, we see the 4th time here. So automatically, as simple as that, without us having to do any hassle from our end, you see that this action gets called. All right, and now this action is called for us under the hood by Remix. We want to go on and update. So to do that, we're going to make use of the response that we get from awaiting JSON, awaiting fetch, and we're going to pass the URL, and we also need to pass this data because we want to pass the body, and the body is going to be json.stringify. So json.stringify, and we want to stringify the value. Okay, and this is going to be an object. Cool. And yeah, so let's try this out. How do we now have access to, how do we get access to this input? Now this input can have a name, and this name we're going to give it, let's say we want to update the what is it, the title, which I'm not seeing here, blog.title. Let's just give it a font bold and also give it a text 2XL and come back, and yeah, I'm just going to give it a text of extra large like this, and we see our title, and quickly give the margin bottom of 3, and here we see it. Cool. So let's say we want to update this title. Remember, JSON placeholder is a fake API, so it's not actually going to be updating the real database. But here we have this name. I'm going to give this name title and give this placeholder of title. The placeholder is optional just for UI purposes, but this name is needed to make this work. Now if I save this and we come back here, this action is going to be receiving an argument, okay? But we're going to get to that argument in a second. Let's see how we can retrieve what the user types inside the input. So here we can have form data. Form data is going to be equal to await the request. And how do we get the request? This action is going to be of type action function like this. An action function needs to be imported from @remix run node here. So here we're going to await our request dot, our request, or we're not getting our request yet. That's because we need to destructure our request from here. And you see, just as we have the loader, we have access to the request, the params, and also the context. So in this case, for now, we need the request. And now we're going to come over here and await the request.form data. So now we have our form data. We want to go on and get the, what is the name? We want to go on and get this title. Now, how do we do this? We're going to say const title is going to be equal to form data dot get. I want to get it by the name of title like this. Now, if we log this title to the console and we save, and let's say we type in something here and click on update or hit enter, we have invalid URL. Okay, and the reason we are having this invalid URL is because if we come back here, you see we are calling fetch with an invalid URL. So I'm going to comment this out, and we're going to give this another shot. I'm just going to reload this and come over here to the title and type something and send. This time around, we don't see our error. And here you see we have something, and this is coming from this. So this is what we are getting from this value here, which is super cool. Now we are sure we are getting the user input. We want to go on and now provide the correct URL, and this is the URL. I'm just going to come over to posts, and this is going to be a patch request to this URL. So again, I'm going to paste this in here, and rather than have one, we want to be able to add the correct URL in here. Now, how do we go on to get access to the params, to this blog ID? And for that, I'm going to, we have seen this actually. If we come over to our index.tsx, you see here, was it here? Was it our roots? No, we haven't seen this. We just saw it in the link where we were trying to navigate the user. All right, so to do this, we are going to come over here and we're going to have access to the params. Okay, and these params, I'm going to comment this out. Let's log these params to the console. So console.log params like this. And now if we send this again, click on update, come back here, you see params is an object. So for us to get the ID, we can just come here and we're going to be doing something like post, and then we're going to have the request, and then not request, sorry, this is going to be params, and then we have the blog ID. All right, so we have the title and we have our response, and I'm going to const data is going to be equal to await response.json like this, and here I'm going to return this object, this JSON object, and here I'm going to pass the post as a key, and the title, the value is going to be this. And this title, remember, we are going to json.stringify the title to this, so we want to go on and update the title. Remember, as I said earlier, this is a fake API, so we might not see the update happen, but if we log this to the console and we go on to send this mutation, then we should see the updated title, at least on the URL. Okay, so let's try this out. I'm going to give this an update and update the title to just say updated title, and we should see this updated title on our terminal. I'm going to click on update, request with get, yeah, that's because we are doing get request. So this is await fetch, and now we need to specify the method in here, and the method is going to be patch like this, and it should be fine. Now you can also go on to specify the content type and application JSON and stuff like that, but I feel this should work. And now if we say updated title and click on update, we don't see an error, and if we come back here we see this. And now if we take a look at the title doesn't update. And why is that? If we come here and console.log response, we don't see the title actually. Yeah, and that's basically because this is a fake API and actually doesn't update. So yeah, so that's it. But we see we don't get any errors, and the actual mutation works. Super cool. And yeah, we can now see how we can display update our UI whenever this form is being submitted. So when this form is being submitted, how do we let our users know? To make our users to be aware when we are submitting our form or when an action is being triggered, you can see somewhere here we have access to the use navigation. And this use navigation is a hook that provides information about a pending page navigation. And now you see this navigation.form action, the action of the form that was submitted, if any. And we can see the method, we can see the form data, and here we have navigation.state. And this is what we are going to be using. So now we have the idle state, which is when there's no navigation pending. And then we have submitting, when a route is being called due to form submission, okay, using this. Now this is where it's submitting, and loading, when the loaders for the next route are being called to render the next props. All right, so normal navigation and get goes through this through state from the idle to the loading and back to the idle. Okay, so this is where our normal navigation. So let's see this navigation dot state, and now we want to check the idle state. So if it's not equal to idle, so we're going to come back here and let's take a look. Let's call this hook const navigation. Navigation is going to be equal to the use navigation hook, and we call this hook. Now we just saw that it has 3 states, so we're going to say is submitting is going to be equal to the navigation, and in this navigation, if we say dot, we have dot state like this, and we can say if this is equal to, and now we have idle, loading, and submitting. Okay, so we want to say if this is equal to idle, and we can just wrap it like this because we want to check if it's not equal to idle. We can obviously have it in here, or you can just come here and do it like this. So now if you have this, it's submitting, it is of type boolean. So we can copy this, and when we have updates like this, we can say if it's submitting, then we want to go on and say submitting like this. Otherwise, we want to go on and display updates like this. So now if we save this and reload this, and we can say some title and click on update, you see we see submitting for a second, and once it is done submitting, we go on to have our state back of update. We're going to take a moment to see how nesting of routes works within Remix application. And for us to see this, we can come here and we have this blog and blogs with this dynamic route. So in this case, it's going to be blog/1. So this sort of route, which is coming into this file. So how about us having a blogs page? So let's say we want to come to our domain and want to go to our domain/blogs. You see we have 404 not found, and you might feel you just have to come to your routes and define a blog.tsx, so a blogs.tsx file like this, and this should be good to go. So if we save this and we come back and give this a reload, you see that we see blogs, and this is working super cool. So let's come back to our domain, and if we click on this blog, you see we are navigated over to the dynamic route, and the dynamic route is actually meant to render this that we have here, this content, but in this case the dynamic route is also going on to render the blogs page. Now, to know why this is happening, if we come over to the documentation and we come over to file conventions and route file naming, there is a concept of route nesting. So we want to go on and achieve nesting route, and here you're going to see other examples or get a deep dive on how routing works within Remix. And we have some examples, and most of these we have gone through. But if you come further down, you see we have nested routing. And nested routing is an idea of coupling segments of the URL to component hierarchy and data. And if you come here, you see what we're trying to achieve. And you see here, they have this concept and they have this dynamic route. So we need to update the name of blogs in our case and have this underscore index.tsx. Now, if we come back to our application and we come to this blogs.tsx, we're going to rename this. And now we're going to have this underscore index.tsx here. With this change, if we come back to application and give this a reload, you see now we are directed to the dynamic route, so blog/1. And if we go back to the blogs page, you see over here we are correctly rendering out the blogs page, which is super cool. Now, this is file routing, and the implication of doing something like this, if we come further down, you would see that this is what we have. So we have our root route, and then we have blogs, and then we have the blog details page. So this sort of UI hierarchy, this is what we're going to have in our application. All right, so before we end this, I want us to take a look at how we can group route. So let's say in our application, we have our main layout. So if we come over to the root.tsx here, we can define this layout, which is going to affect our entire application. So let's say somewhere here before the main, in the body, we want to have this header, and this header is going to be more like the main navigation like this. Now, if we save this and we come back here, you see we have the main navigation here, and we also have the main navigation if we come over to the blog details page. And also if we go to the blogs page, we have the main navigation. So this is the default behavior. Everything that you define within this root route, this layout that we have in this root route is going to affect your entire application. One way is to make sure that you don't write any logic in this root layout that perhaps you don't want to affect your entire application. So let's say we want to have a layout, some kind of layout that we can use across some pages, so some sections of our application. And how can we go on to do that? So let's say we want a layout that we can use for this blogs page, and we also want a layout that we can also use for this blog details page, but we don't want that layout to be available application wide. Now for that, in this route.tsx, we can create a special layout folder. Whatever we specify here is going to be used as a link in the URL. And if you take a look at this underscore index.tsx, you see it starts with an underscore, and that's because we don't want to have our domain /index.tsx. We want this to be our home page. Now we can make use of that logic. We can make use of this route naming convention, and let's say we want to have just a route for our blog, a layout, so we can have something like a blog layout.tsx file. Now this is going to be a layout, so if we have something like this React component, and we define our blog layout and give this a save. Now if we come back to application, it doesn't affect anywhere in our application. You can see we still have the main layout everywhere, and the main layout is going to be everywhere until we explicitly come over to the route and get rid of it. So this is our blog layout, and how can we go on to make use of this layout inside this blogs page and also the blog details page? Now we need to update the name of these two pages. So these pages where we want this blog to be affected, this blog layout. That's not going to be all, but that is a step in the right direction to achieve these shared layouts we can use between these two pages. So we need to rename this blogs index.tsx and rename it to Word. So we're going to come here and we're going to rename this, and this blogs is now going to start with this underscore blog layout like this, and then we're going to have our blogs and index.tsx, which is still going to be pointing out to the page. Now if we save this, you're going to see this name. Now we have this, it's quite long, but underscore blog to match this name, so it has to match this underscore blog layout. So the same is going to match like this, so underscore blog layout, and then we're going to have dot blogs, and you know that this dot is more like slash, and because we have index, it's going to be slash blogs, and then it's going to be the index page, so this page over here for blogs. Now that's not all, as I said previously, but it's actually a step in the right direction. If we come back to application and we go to /blogs, so if we come to /blogs, we don't see anything. Now the way for us to see this work is if we come to our blog layout, and here I'm just going to have a header which I'll call blog navigation, and after this header we need to have our outlet. So here we need to import this outlet file, and now if we save this, you see every other name, that is every other file that is inheriting this name, so this blog layout name is going to automatically be rendered in this outlet, and then they're also going to have this header. So if we come back to application, you see now we are seeing this blog navigation, and if we go over to our home page and we navigate to a blog details page, we are not going to see that. And the reason why we're not seeing that is because here we haven't also updated the name. So if we come over here and we rename this to also have our underscore blog layout, that's all, because that is the name of this blog layout.tsx. Now if we update the name and we come back, you see we're just going to give this a reload. You see now we have this blog navigation, and this blog navigation is coming in from this blog layout here. So every other page is going to be nested or is going to be replaced with this outlet. So this is it. This is how you can go on to achieve or share layouts within your Remix applications. Now, thank you so much. And then we're going to have a brief recap of what we have been able to cover so far. To recap what we have been able to cover in Remix, we're going to first look at Remix and how it goes on to simplify building React pages, building full stack applications. First, I'm going to come over to the root.tsx, and we have seen how layout works within Remix. We have seen this function, the function of outlets. We have also seen how we can make use of CSS file in our Remix application. So in this case, we are making use of Tailwind CSS. And then you've also seen how we can go on to handle routing. So you've seen how we can define routes within our Remix application, how we can link through different pages of our Remix application, and then we've also seen how to go on and fetch data, making use of this loader API. We have seen how to define our own custom meta tags that we can use for SEO purposes. We have seen how to share layouts within our application. And we have also seen how we can go on to handle form submission, making use of this action API that we get. So this is the first look at Remix, and then we are going to continue and dive deeper into how Remix works and what an awesome framework that Remix is.